Hey gang, welcome back to Conquering Your Commander. This week... Oh no. What the... So, hey guys, I just want to try something new. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, let me know in the comments below. If you didn't, do the same. Barring any more unexpected dragon attacks, in this week's episode of Conquering Your Commander, we'll be looking at the draconic pay rune of the Izzet League, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. Costing 2 colorless, 2 blue, and 2 red, we get a decently sized 4 power, 4 toughness flying dragon with 2 abilities, 1 triggered and 1 activated. To no surprise, since this is a blue and red general, these abilities are related to drawing and dealing damage. Niv-Mizzet's triggered ability is very strong, and presumably one of the main reasons that people play him. Whenever you draw a card, no matter how you drew it, you have to deal 1 damage to a creature or player. You should note that this is not a May ability, and although I've yet to see it happen, there could be a situation where the only legal targets on the field are Niv-Mizzet or yourself, so keep that in mind. Niv-Mizzet's activated ability is a simple tap to draw a card, which enables his triggered ability. Niv-Mizzet the Firemind functions best in a control or combo style deck, which allows a player to abuse his damage when drawing trigger. Before we begin, I just want to bring your attention to the pretty unique flavor text that's found on Niv-Mizzet Firemind. If we flip the card 90 degrees to the right, as indicated in the said text, we get an interesting Easter egg. Like most control decks, the early game is about building up resources and trying to slowly sculpt your hand. Mana rocks are staples to nearly any serious EDH deck, with few exceptions, so your first 4 turns will most likely consist of mostly dropping these. Since for this guide, and the majority of my play experience is from a multiplayer meta, you'll want to fly under the radar for the most part. This means don't counter every spell that comes out, but instead focusing on countering the ones that might save other people. The most important thing to remember when playing a control deck is to make the other 2 non-leading opponents you're playing against value having you around more than they do taking you out. Library manipulation is also pretty crucial for the late game, so dropping an early Crystal Ball or Soothsaying to help smooth out your draw will pay off massively later on. Long-term Plans is another great card to resolve early on, or even save it for later. It's nearly an instant seed tutor for blue, and it isn't as though drawing 3 cards is particularly hard for blue in 1 turn. If you've got a great hand, save it for later, otherwise use it to help forward your board position early on. By the mid-game, survival is the name of the game at this point. You'll hopefully have missed as few land drops as possible and established a fairly unthreatening board state. Slowly, and I mean slowly, can you start dropping a few threats. For mid-game, these threats should be things that aren't tantamount to your winning strategy, but instead cards that can apply some pressure or forward our position. Since we'll be running a ton of spells, Gutter Snipe and Talrand's Sky Summoner will offer our deck some decent reach at no extra cost. Willbreaker is another fun threat to drop on the field. She'll turn those pings from Niv-Mizzet into threatened spells. She will most likely be removed quite quickly, but that's fine for us since it means that there'll be 1 less removal spell for Niv-Mizzet when we want to go off. I'd also suggest during the mid-game to be aggressive with your wheels. Typically you can recur them via Mystic Retrieval, Arcanomancer, or set up a Past in Flame cycle. Cycling through your deck, picking up pieces that you need, generally leads to a favorable board state. Unless of course your opponents are running a lot of graveyard hate. If you've made it to this point with as little disruption as possible, now is when you start to bring out your big guns. One of the best ways to ensure that your combo or spells aren't disrupted is to never allow an opponent the chance to react to them. Sure, you could run a ton of counter spells, but they'll eat up precious mana that we might need later on. To this end, I would really recommend running Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. He'll keep any opposing control player honest by forcing them to react only at sorcery speed. Psychosis Crawlers should be considered a secondary or tertiary win condition in the sense that he has the function to back up as Niv-Mizzet on the fly. The fact that he's an artifact opens him up to potentially being easier to remove, but his utility of hitting all the opponents and not just one makes him ultimately worthwhile. Enter the Infinite becomes a potential win condition with Niv-Mizzet and or Psychosis Crawler on the field. Even without them, having access to the majority of your library will let you sculpt your hand to near perfection. Speaking of perfection, and this combo is very far from it, you might want to consider running Arcanomancer, Turnabout, and Riptide Laboratory. This can generate us infinite mana, and works as such. With 11 mana on the field, you simply cast Turnabout to float the mana and untap all your lands again. Cast Arcanomancer to return a Turnabout back to our hand, then bounce Arcanomancer with Riptide Laboratory back to our hand. You can then cast all of these and bounce them back and forth as you see fit to generate infinite mana. A great way to spend that mana would be making an opponent draw out their library with Blue Sun Zenith, or nuking the field with Comet Storm. So now let's look at a few suggestions that I would recommend in any Niv-Mizzet deck. Wheel spells. No, seriously, wheel spells. You're going to want to run Wheel of Fortune, Windfall, Winds of Change, Reforge the Souls. Seriously, all of them, I'm not even kidding. They do so much damage with Niv-Mizzet on the board, not to mention they disrupt other control or combo players' hands. Great cards for this deck. Melik Izzet Paragon can provide us with not only library manipulation, but he'll copy the spells you cast off the top of your library. This can lead to some hilariously broken turns when you ramp to 1 billion by copying Turnabout or High Tide twice, in addition to any other shenanigans you might be casting that turn, and we all know you'll be casting shenanigans. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention Curiosity and Ophiate Eye, since they're the second part of a 2-card combo with Niv-Mizzet. These enchantments allow Niv-Mizzet to go infinite, since whenever he draws a card, he'll do a damage, and whenever he does damage, he'll draw a card. Thankfully, these enchantments have a May clause, so you won't deck yourself out unless you want to. Mind Moil is a fun but expensive costing enchantment for Niv-Mizzet. It can cycle through our library very quickly provided we hit at least one cheaply costed spell. I've been on the receiving end of this resolving enough times to know that it's usually a good indicator that Niv-Mizzet's player is about to move for the endgame. Similarly, Teferi's Puzzle Box will draw us a bunch of cards per turn, and also disrupt our opponent's hands just as the wheel spells do. Having to wait until our next draw step to deal damage can be slow, but it does mess with our opponents the immediate turn after it comes out. Laboratory Maniac is probably my favorite alternate win con for the deck. It's a staple to the Doomsday Vintage decks, and rightly so. We don't even have to wait until our draw step to win via his triggered ability, which when coupled with the multitude of ways Blue has to flash things in and draw, means we can sometimes win just out of nowhere. Terrain Generator is a card worth mentioning. It's a great way to ramp in Niv-Mizzet, especially in conjunction with all the hand cycling that you're going to be doing. Since we're playing a blue deck, we'll have a lot of mana open up during other people's turns, so it's great to use it to get you a land ahead. Well everybody, I hope you enjoyed my take on Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. He might not be the most competitive of the Izzet commanders, but I guarantee you'll have a blast with him. Whether you're building him— oh god, I just realized that was a pun. Whether you're building him to be all in for the Curiosity plan, or whether you just want to play him with every wheel spell known to Magic, Izzet decks are sure a blast to play. I did it again, my goodness. It was the same pun too, what was I thinking? You'll have to forgive me guys. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching my videos, and be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to always be up to date on any new episodes of my stuff.